Hello and welcome to Let's Unpack That. It's a podcast with us two college grads where we analyze books that we read in middle school from literary and socio-political perspectives. I'm Lydia.
I'm Nina.
And we are pretty close to being done with the Hunger Games.
Kind of crazy if you think about it. I feel like we just started, but it goes fast.
Yeah, we are also very close to the prequel.
Yes, that's coming out, let's see, today is the 13th, so it's coming out in exactly a week.
Ooh, which means we'll definitely have started reading it by the time we record our next episode.
Ooh, I haven't pre-ordered mine yet. I should probably do that.
Yeah, me too.
Also big news in terms of prequel, sequel, whatever. Hot off the press. I am so excited for this, but for those of you who don't know, Stephenie Meyer is going to be releasing Midnight Sun, I think is what it's called. But essentially it is Twilight from Edward's perspective. And if you don't think we're going to go hard on that book and have a bonus episode devoted purely to that book, you have something else coming for you, because, oh man, I can already smell the toxic masculinity and the objectifying of women. Oh, it's going to be good. I'm so ready.
Oh man. Yeah, the internet went crazy when that was announced, and I mean, for good reason. We've had the first, maybe 10 chapters of that for years and years because it was leaked online, and then Stephenie Meyer just put it on her website. But this is going to be an actual, edited, completed book, and so I'm interested to see, first, what changes from the original draft that was leaked, and also how Twilight changes to adapt to the times.
Yeah, I want to know what,
I don't know why.
Edits, yeah.
It's coming out now. Is it riding on that Hunger Games popularity? That'll be out, I want to say August or September.
It's going to be August.
So way later this year.
Yeah.
So we won't immediately get into it.
August 4th.
August 4th.
So
okay.
We will get that throwback. You know, honestly, I think it's in the spirit of quarantine where first it was Disney where they were like, here, have Frozen 2. Here you go. And then everyone else was
have
like,
Hamilton.
Have Hamilton, which is fucking amazing. We're getting Hamilton on Disney Plus on July 3rd. And so I have been reborn and I am born again and so excited. I get to watch it with my boyfriend and make him sit through the whole thing with me. Oh my God. And I think also, who else did it? Well, they're doing in-home movie releases, which I could see actually becoming a permanent thing after this. They're they're releasing things straight to streaming. So different movies that are coming out, and I could see them continuing to do that because that saves them a heck of a lot of money. So I think it was in that vein of thought of well, fuck it. Everyone's at home. Everyone's upset about one thing or another because we're in this weird turbulent time. And I think it's in that spirit of, well, fuck it. If not now, when? You know? Yeah.
From a writer's perspective, it's really interesting to me that she came back to it after all these years. Because it's been so long since those chapters were leaked. And she would have had to have this churning and in progress for at least a year, I think. But what made her go back to such an old project?
Putting her kids through college?
Does she have kids?
Yeah.
Of course she does. Are they in college?
I turned to Google.
Oh, all-knowing Google. Give us the answers to our questions.
Oh, she has 3 sons. I thought she only had 2. Oh, apparently despite the criticism that she's had for putting romantic relationships and traditional gender roles in her novels, she does consider herself a feminist. So her oldest son was born in 1997.
So just out of college. So yeah, she's putting her kids through college.
Holy shit. I didn't realize. So she married her husband in 1994 when Meyer was 21. So she had her son at our age, at 24.
I mean, I'm not surprised.
I'm not surprised either, but
people younger than us have kids already.
Yeah, my friend who has a child just left her abusive relationship. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Not that, I mean, and obviously there's nothing wrong. Being a mom is really important. It's a hard job. It's the hardest job. There's nothing wrong with having kids early or not. I'm saying this not a, oh my god, look, she had kids so young. It's just like, oh wow. You know, when I was first reading these books when I was 12, it seemed like, oh my god, Stephanie Meyer is so much older than me and da 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 da. I couldn't even fathom being anywhere near 21 when I first read those books. And now I'm older than she was when she got married, and I'm the same age she would have been when she had her son. And I'm like, I cannot picture it. It's crazy. So just kind of bringing things to life in a different way. Obviously, we're not downing anybody who's had kids early or kids at all. It's a very important job. I hope to have kids one day myself. Maybe. Yeah. I'm thinking about it. I still haven't decided.
If the planet doesn't burn up, maybe.
Yeah.
See, that's a major factor. And that's a yikes moment, folks.
Yay! Speaking of yikes moments, let's get into Hunger Games.
Yes, back into the Hunger Games, a sequel that has definitely been in the works for more than a year. So, today we are analyzing chapters 21 and 22 of the first book. Nina, would you like to read the summary for us?
I absolutely would. Thank you so much for asking. Chapter 21. Katniss prepares for the feast. Remember, they have just announced that there's going to be a big end of games feast, and feast is in quotation marks. Really, it's just an invitation to a bloodbath, kind of like the cornucopia was at the beginning of the games, but essentially to bring everyone back together and duke it out, essentially. They've been tempted with things that they absolutely need, and Katniss's case, that would be medicine for Peeta because he is slowly but surely dying. So she prepares for the feast. She camouflages the cave entrance, eats a bit, takes Peeta's jacket. It's gotten a lot colder in the arena, which she's noticed, and she thinks about what must be happening in District 12. Right now, school will be canceled because of the feast, and her family will either stay at home to watch it in private or go to the square for support. She thinks of her friends back home, Greasy Say, Madge, and of course Gale. She wonders what he thinks about Peeta and the relationship, and if he would be her boyfriend if she went back to District 12 now. Katniss kisses the still sleeping Peeta goodbye, still playing into the star-crossed lovers idea. And as she heads towards the cornucopia, she wishes Gale were there to watch her back. The sun rises on the cornucopia and the feast table comes out of the ground. Foxface immediately grabs her bag and runs. She stops for nothing else. She grabs her bags and darts out of there. Katniss runs for hers, but gets caught by Clove's knife. Clove makes a whole speech about carving Katniss apart bit by bit, but then Thresh interferes. He kills Clove for having something to do with Rue's death, and spares Katniss's life for helping Rue. Katniss runs back to the cave with her medicine, injects it into Peeta's arm, and falls unconscious from the cut on her forehead. And that is where chapter 21 ends. Okay, so what would have you done? And what do you think Katniss's family ended up doing? Do you think that, would you watch the feast in private or go to the square? You know, either mourn in private or have support of the public?
I don't know, because, I mean, it depends on whether or not her family believes this act with Peeta. And if her family believes this and thinks that she's really risking her life to go to this feast because she loves him, then I think they might go to the square for support from other people and be like, oh yes, she's so great. It's great that she's doing this. And they might, I don't know, make an alliance with the baker's family and get some food that way. But I think if they don't believe it, if they're like, no, that's too unlike her, there's no way she's doing this because she's in love with him, this is all fake, I think they would stay home and kind of sit in it a little bit and be like, kind of mad that she's risking her life for an act, and kind of doing the same thing that Gale is definitely doing, which is isolating himself, watching as little of the games as possible, going to a field somewhere and sitting. Yeah.
And I guess that does beg the question, does her family believe it?
Yeah. And I think Prim believes it, because Prim's young. And I think she said something when Katniss comes back. If I remember correctly, Katniss didn't want to tell her for fear of, breaking her heart.
Yeah.
But the mom is a bit of a wild card. Just because her mom is a wild card in general, I don't know what she would believe, because she's been hardened by life in the seam, and she might have the same pessimistic attitudes as Gale. After Katniss's dad died, she shut herself up.
Yeah.
And she shut down. She didn't go looking for friendship or looking for help. Either way, she would be more likely to stay home.
So you think it has more to do with whether or not they believe this is an act versus how they would mourn in private or in public, if they feel like they would be the publicly mourning family or the privately mourning family. I think they probably watched at home. I feel like just given the nature of their past lives and how they didn't really ask for a lot of help, I think they probably would have stayed at home. I'm sure Gale was there at Katniss's house, but I don't think they would have gone out to the square. And I don't know if it really has any, in my opinion, I don't know how much it has to do with whether or not they think it was an act, because if they're anything like Katniss, which assuming they are because they're her family, they also know that she's working the alliance thing and trying to bring them both home. So whether or not they believe it's a love story, or if it's District 12 together kind of thing, like fighting for the Seam and fighting for District 12 in general, I feel like, do they believe it's a love story? Yeah, maybe not. But do they think that she's fighting for the chance to bring them both home? Oh yeah, absolutely. But to me, I don't think that has anything to do with where they would go to mourn. If something bad happened, I think they would prefer to watch it in private and probably have Gale over at some point.
Yeah, so Katniss wonders about all of this as she tries to sleep before the feast. She can't sleep. And what's weird during this night of, like, the calm before the storm is that the love triangle makes its appearance. Katniss wonders what Gale must be doing, and if he's hoping that both she and Peeta will survive. She says, Gale's not my boyfriend, but would he be if I opened that door? That's from page 280. And she also says, I wonder what he makes of all this kissing. I'm wondering why she would wonder that, and I thought maybe the only reason that she would be thinking of this in the context of Gale and how he's reacting to all this would be that she either had a crush on him and is only now realizing it, or she thought he had a crush on her before she left.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I almost think, is it something to distract her from what's coming? Is it the easy, I say the easiest thing to think about. It's not easy to think about, but it's easier to think about than what's coming next. Is she thinking about Gale because it's easier than thinking about the fact that she's about to go and potentially die in, a couple of hours? Is she thinking about Gale because that's her way of coping? Is thinking about the person who brings her the most calm and serenity and just this peace, so that she can focus on what needs to happen and focus on not focusing and not being so much in her head? Is she thinking about it because it's, for her, better to think about that than it is to think about what's happening next?
I guess. She's thought about Gale quite a bit in the arena. Thinking about his advice, thinking about how they would hunt together, and wishing that she was back in those woods with him. But this new, this might be the first time that Katniss says the word boyfriend.
Yeah.
And that just seems so out of place and sudden, because she's not even thinking of Peeta as her boyfriend.
Yeah. I wonder
so why is she thinking of Gale in that way?
I don't know. Suzanne Collins, was this like an editor's note that they wanted you to add in there, or did it have a further purpose? It's interesting, It's like, why? I guess my question is, in the original draft, what were Katniss's thoughts before leaving for the feast? Is this something that was added in afterwards as like a playing to the audience kind of thing? Mm-hmm. Or does this genuinely have something with the original thought of the character that she wanted to add in?
Yeah, and that brings me to one of my main questions that I have about the whole series, which is the love triangle forced? And part of me wants to say yes, because it's such a well-established YA trope. It's almost impossible to have a popular YA book published in the 2010s without a love triangle, and that was part of the marketing of it.
Yeah.
But what does it contribute to the message of the story? I think that Suzanne Collins wouldn't have put it in here if it didn't contribute a little bit to the message.
What do you think that message is?
That, well, I mean, it's the same as any dystopia. It's that we are closer to dystopia than we realize, and that we need to step up and take certain steps to ensure that we don't live in a dystopia like this one. And we've talked about before how The Hunger Games is a very well-researched and relevant dystopia for our day and age, and how it has been for a long time. Mm-hmm. And actually, this week, one of my favorite YouTubers, Lena Norms, published a video where she reread the entire series, and she addressed a lot of the things that we explored in this podcast before, like climate change, racism, the fact that if you're enjoying the Hunger Games, that almost means that you're not getting it. It's a good video. It's like 35 minutes long, but you should watch it.
Yeah.
But she says something about how this as a dystopia would be taken a lot more seriously if it wasn't marketed as YA. If it had anyone but a teenage girl as a protagonist, it would be perhaps considered in the ranks of 1984 and The Handmaid's Tale as modern classics, because it is so thorough. And actually, I found a teaching site while doing research for this episode. So teachers are using the Hunger Games in classes, but the Hunger Games is still YA lit. It's not on the rank of dystopia that gets taken seriously. And because I think there's so much potential to say that the systems that have been built to bring down the people who are already at their lowest are not indestructible is a little bit trivialized by the love triangle, especially by our focus on the love triangle, because it almost distracts us from the message that, oh, these are kids being forced to kill other kids.
Yeah.
In the same vein that, like, if you enjoy the movie, you're no better than the Capitol person.
Right.
So that's a weird thing. Why do you think the love triangle is in here?
It's hard for me to say.
Aside from marketing.
Yeah. No, it's hard for me to say because I know that Suzanne Collins put a lot of thought into the book, and she's done a lot of research, and she's done a lot of good things. But to me, because I'm a little more skeptical, to me it seems like, if not her original thought, it was added in to kind of bring in that YA audience. Like, maybe no one else, I don't know, because then it kind of goes back to the idea of, did she intentionally create this book to be a YA with a teenage protagonist so that kids would read it? As in making it a classic for a younger audience? Or was she hoping that it would have the same kind of weight that 1984 or Handmaid's Tale had? And it was just the unfortunate circumstance of the marketing and the audience that did pick it up that kind of resulted in where it ended up. Was she intentionally targeting audiences that are younger about the threat of imminent dystopia because she saw something coming and thought that the hope was in the younger audiences? Or was she writing because she thought it was an important story to tell and the audience just kind of came to her? So that's my first question. Yeah. My second thought would be, when I was younger, I would have said, oh, the reason there's a love triangle in it is because it's Katniss and Gale or Katniss and Peeta. Like, duh, that's the whole thing. Now that I'm older, I really don't know. I feel like you could argue that it is for selling the book as a YA and just including that love triangle in there because that's what everyone wanted. Or there's a reason in there that we don't know yet as readers, and we just see gradually as Peeta and Katniss and Gale all change, and eventually Gale and Katniss grow apart. Was it put in there to kind of start that establishment of the slowly dissipating relationships between them and how relationships change over time and how different events can change how people interact with one another and relate to one another and change who you are? So is this kind of like a marker in terms of like, here's the starting line, we're going to start here and we're going to see where we finish, and adding that in? Or is there more depth to it in terms of, okay, this is a YA novel, so obviously there's a love triangle? To me, I have no idea. I'm honestly stuck right in the middle. I think you could argue for either one.
Me too. And also I want to say, I don't think this is a bad book because it has a love triangle.
No.
I don't think it's a tropey book at all.
Not at all. It's an excellent book.
It's a wild ride. And it's a really good book and a really good series. I want to believe that Suzanne Collins would not have put in a love triangle without a purpose or just for the YA lulls.
Yeah.
And I think, maybe we're seeing the effects of that now. Because so many years later, so many of us are rereading the series and finding so much new stuff to explore in it.
Yeah.
And maybe that love triangle and the whole Team Peeta, Team Gale did draw us in when we were 13, but what draws us in now and what makes the book timeless is how much we can gain from it as adults.
Yeah. The whole purpose was so we could make this podcast, first and foremost. Second, no, but I think that I think that's a good thought, because it's like, if she really wanted it to be timeless, then yeah, she probably did intentionally write it with a teenage protagonist in mind, knowing that it would be marketed to a younger audience, and hope that they would come back to it at a later time.
And just one more thing, like, YA is for everybody.
Absolutely. We need more subgenres of YA. I would like college age or college graduate YA, thanks.
Oh yeah, I love, like, the new adult category. It fascinates me. And I'm, like, still having trouble getting into the adult genre. But I'm slowly getting into it. But, like, just because something is marketed towards teenage girls or has a teenage girl protagonist doesn't mean it's only for 13-year-old girls.
No.
And I think The Hunger Games is a prime example of that.
Or My Little Pony, marketed towards 6-year-olds, and yet we have brownies.
See, I'm not going to even get into that.
Yeah, I don't want to either.
Yeah, let's not even go there. So moving on. I guess, were you Team Peeta or Team Gale? We've talked about this a little bit before.
But... Oh gosh. Let me pull from the depths of my knowledge. I think I was Team Gale.
Yeah, you strike me as a Team Gale.
Oh, thanks.
Team Jacob, Team Gale.
Yeah,
You're all about the rugged underdog.
I know. Well, I mean, I think it could be argued that Peeta was the underdog at some point. I liked Gale because I thought that he understood her fundamentally, like her foundations. You know, he knew her before. Kind of being part of that before and after, I thought at the time was important. But I can see now how, as you grow and change, the people who were there for you in your before may not necessarily be able to connect with you in the same way as they could when you reach your after.
Right.
So, right. I mean, at this point, I'm like, Katniss, fuck it. You don't need these men. Just get out. You're fine. Who needs them? You can get good dick anywhere. It's great. It's fine. So I wouldn't say I'm either one now, but at the time I thought, okay, yeah, Gale. To me, it was important that Gale was part of her past. And I think that also plays into the fact that I was very much the kid that would hold on to the past a lot, hold grudges, and think about, oh, remember when, or whatever. And I've definitely grown out of that in the past couple of years. So that is certainly something to be considered. Look at me. I'm psychoanalyzing myself.
That's what this podcast is for.
What about you?
I wasn't Team anybody back in the day.
I was different, TM.
Yeah, I was different, TM. Same with how I was with Bella. But now I see a lot more clearly, like, how Katniss's relationship with Peeta is going to help her be a better person. I still don't agree with the fact that they ended up married and having kids at the end, because I think that's just such a lazy ending. But Katniss has lived with unrest her whole life, and dishonesty, and having to find her own way and trust herself and trust the very few people that haven't betrayed her and that wouldn't betray her. Basically, Gale, that's right. It. She doesn't trust her own mom. She says that multiple times in these 2 chapters. She doesn't trust her mom. And I think what Peeta has to teach her is, first of all, accepting love. To pull out a cliche quote from Perks of Being a Wallflower here.
Yeah.
We accept the love we think we deserve. And Katniss doesn't think she deserves a lot of love. And Peeta is prepared to give her a lot of love. Which is why I think she's so hesitant to accept that he actually likes her and that he's actually trying to keep her alive out of love. She takes a lot of convincing. Yeah. Because she doesn't think that she deserves it. And so learning to accept love and to trust others is an important part of her character development, and I think Peeta has that to teach her. She's so willing to sacrifice herself, is the thing. In the end, it was a loving act to go and get the medicine for Peeta at the feast. Everything she did for Rue was out of love. And yet she can't understand anybody doing the same thing for her.
And she makes it out to be like, oh, it's because Rue and I were allies. Oh, it's because everyone in District 12 will hate me if I don't come home with Peeta. You know, like she makes it into very black and white.
Every bit of love is because of a debt. And we'll get into a debt more later, because she views it as a significant part of her relationship with Peeta. But she doesn't understand just giving freely out of nothing.
Yeah.
Or receiving freely out of nothing without owing someone in return.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the feast. She's knocked Peeta out long ago.
Mm-hmm.
She gets to the feast. Foxface immediately runs out and gets her stuff. Mm-hmm. And she realizes that maybe Foxface is the real opponent here. Foxface might actually have a chance. So.
And what a cheap friggin' ending that character got.
Berries, really?
She reminds me of Joanna, almost. The Joanna that we meet in Catching Fire and we have throughout Catching Fire and Mockingjay. She lingers on the outskirts but remains deadly. She very much acts the part of the fox. Like, she is exactly her namesake. I think aside from being named after a fox for her looks, she genuinely does act like one. I decided to have some fun and researched foxes. I love them. A couple months ago, I went to a wolf sanctuary, and they actually have a couple of resident foxes, and they are so cute. They're interesting little creatures. I like them a lot. So I decided to look into how foxes survive in the wild. So I went to cabinlife.com, and the title of this article was The Red Fox Survival Strategies Revealed. And the interesting thing was, once you read about it, this is pretty much what the character did. The character of Foxface did to survive as long as she did in the games. Living in plain sight, hiding and being active when others are not. Also, the author wrote, curiosity blended with a strong capacity for learning and novel thought forms a strong complement to the red fox's innate survival instincts. A fox's life is clearly built upon problem solving and strategic planning. In mastering the day-to-day art of survival, foxes build routines in finding food and maintaining comfort. We never see Foxface uncomfortable. We never see her struggling. You know, part of that could be due to Katniss's limited point of view, but I think it also shows her adaptability. It shows her ability to be put in a situation and learn and be able to make the best of the situation based on what she needs to do next. You know, she has this ability to say, okay, so the feast, what do I need to do with the feast? I'm going to run out first and get my stuff and get out. Great, cool. You know, she scavenges from the cornucopia piles after the careers sort it all and take it out for themselves. She steals food and she takes berries, or she only eats what other people are eating. It just shows to me, I think, her ability to, like the fox, problem solve and plan strategically, you know, with the ability to learn and have this kind of new idea or new way of thinking in order to make the best of a situation. So I think she's kind of a cool character. She made a call to fly under the radar, and it's really proving to be a success for her in this case. And I just think it's interesting. And my thought was, when I was looking through, you know, just kind of researching the foxes, would this tactic have worked for Katniss? And I was kind of playing it over in my mind, because there's a couple times where Katniss goes like, shit, I should have done that too. Oh crap, like, she's already done it. Why didn't I do that? And I turned the idea over in my head, but I think there was a possibility, if Katniss had decided to really take it like Foxface did, there was a possibility that she could have pulled it off. But I think Katniss's big difference between her and Foxface is that Katniss overthinks things. I highly doubt that Foxface is sitting there wondering how to present herself to Panem, and how to be this sly, survivor-esque competitor in the games. Like, for her, this is just survival. This isn't necessarily the games. This is, okay, I need to live. That seems to be her only motive. So she's not trying to be something for the cameras of Panem. She's just trying to get through this. And Katniss has those same instincts, and she has the same ability to be stealthy and to be fast and quick and bring her own food to herself and kind of survive on her own. But she's brought down by her overall gameplay. You know, she's brought down with the fact, like, I have to be this for the cameras. I have to show this for the, you know, people, for the sponsors. And I think that also comes from a lack of self-confidence and thinking that she can survive on her own. Clearly, Foxface doesn't give a fuck. You know, she's like, God, whatever, I'll just do it. But, you know, Katniss is very concerned with what the sponsors are thinking of and thinking that she needs them to survive, which leads her to overthink things, which is why the tactic wouldn't work for Katniss in this situation. But what do you think about that?
I think she was so far in the spotlight at the beginning of the games, it would be impossible for her to play it this way because everybody's expecting something of her. And at the point that the games start, like, if she doesn't deliver that, she's dead. She's already assigned a part to play at the beginning.
Yeah.
And there's no way that she can avoid that. Whereas Foxface is a nobody. I mean, we don't even know her real name.
Exactly. It's almost like she didn't have a choice to be the fox. I feel like
she didn't have that option. That option was taken away from her when Peeta revealed his crush for her on live TV.
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, her choice of how to play the game has been taken away.
Just adding to it, to what's been taken from her. Anyway.
Layers and layers of manipulation.
Haha.
We love it.
Yep.
Love to see it.
Mm-hmm.
So, Katniss has to grab her bag next because it's tiny and anybody could take it.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that Foxface takes the bag and runs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been announced that all of the bags have something that each competitor needs, right?
Yeah. So, what do they need? Foxface seems alright. She seems to be doing fine. And yet...
Yeah. I always wondered what was in the other bags. What do you think?
I really don't know. Her Foxface may be food, now that her supply was blown up. She must be starving, and especially since it's gotten so cold in the arena. I think maybe Thresh needed something to keep warm in the long grass, because that doesn't offer much shelter. Cato and Clove may be food, since their supply got blown up, but also I think they would be capable enough to hunt and get small game. I don't think they would have a problem with that, so I don't know what they might need. Maybe entertainment, because Clove certainly seems bored here.
I kind of had almost the opposite thoughts. I think Cato and Clove, what could they possibly need? Food seemed to be the most likely, because they were only, they were really fucked when all the food blew up. Like, they were done. For Foxface, I couldn't figure it out. I would say shelter or medicine. She seems like she's doing all right with food. But I also think, we don't know how she is as a hunter. So maybe now that the supplies have been blown up, she would need food desperately. I think if it were to be some kind of food, it would be something to continue to sustain themselves. So not just like a loaf of bread and some water. Like, it would be something to help them continuously get food for both Cato and Clove and Foxface. For me, I think Thresh somehow, I think his need was sentimental. Something to remind him of home and something to keep him going, because he gets so, he gets so upset at the mention of Rue's name that I think it's obvious that his home and the people he came from mean a lot to him. So I think there was a psychological need along with a physical that he either knew he needed or he didn't know he needed, but everyone else did.
Yeah, that's a good point. I wonder if he's heard anything from his district since he left, or since Rue died.
If you had to pick one tribute for Suzanne Collins to re-release The Hunger Games in their perspective, who would you choose?
Oh, for Suzanne Collins to pull a Midnight Sun?
Yes.
We're already getting the President Snow, which is like the pinnacle of evil. I think something from Foxface's perspective would be not very interesting. We get so much of District 11 later that maybe Thresh... I don't know. Maybe... we keep talking about how there's so much missing time in here, particularly with Rue and Thresh, that I almost want to say Rue, her perspective going into the games, and then when she dies, pass it off to Thresh.
Oh, that's a good one. I kind of like the idea of just having just Thresh, but yeah, I like the idea of switching off the perspectives too. That's pretty good.
Yeah, because she's almost like passing the torch to him when he's the only one left from his district, and it's him, Foxface, and then the two pairs who obviously the game makers want one of those two pairs to survive. Otherwise they wouldn't have changed the rules.
Right.
So he's kind of on the sidelines.
Yeah.
But let's talk about this whole situation and what happens when Clove attacks Katniss at the cornucopia, because Thresh intervenes. So Clove catches Katniss in the forehead with her knife, manages to pin her to the ground, and Clove, my god, makes the fatal villain mistake of talking too much instead of just doing the deed. She makes this whole evil speech about how she and Cato are going to kill Katniss slowly, and then they're gonna kill Peeta too, and then she takes her time choosing a fancy knife, and it's like, you know that the other tribute is coming, right? There's still 2 bags on the table. One of them's yours, one of them's not. Thresh is still on his way. Why are you monologuing? So, Katniss manages to fake out Clove for a second by shouting for Peeta.
Yeah.
But Clove says he's nearly dead. Cato knows where he cut him. Does Cato know? Because it wasn't the artery. We discussed that last episode. Surely Cato didn't expect Peeta to still be alive like a week later. Yeah. Come on.
Yeah.
That was a boo-boo. And then Clove makes the mistake of talking about Rue. She mentions that Rue and Katniss were allies and that her crew killed Rue. And we talked about this before a little bit, wondering how Thresh knew about Rue's death. And it turns out we all learned the truth here, and the truth was in the movie all the time, but I hadn't watched that scene closely enough. So in the book, Thresh barely lets Clove explain before he kills her, and then he asks Katniss if she really was Rue's ally, and Katniss has the chance to explain everything, from blowing up the career's food to decorating Rue's body with flowers and getting bread from District 11. So it's clear that he didn't know about the alliance before then. In the movie, he doesn't ask Katniss any questions. He spares her based on just what he overheard from Clove, which is probably why we thought that he had more information and he must have met up with Rue, because Clove didn't say a lot about the alliance.
Also in this moment, I never realized, I've read this book at least 4 or 5, maybe half a dozen times in the past decade. I have never, ever caught on that she tells Thresh to kill her and to make it fast. I miss that every single time. And I'm guilty of doing this, skipping lines, because I'm a very fast reader, and I'll tend to just kind of, especially if it's a high intensity moment, I'll read through faster. It's like the music in my head's just going, and you want to get through it faster. But reading it now and just realizing it, that she told him, make it fast, and, essentially surrenders to him, changes the whole dynamic of the moment. It's pretty significant when you think about the fact that Katniss was going for broke. She was like, I'm going to win this. We're going to do it. But then she ultimately surrenders to Thresh and essentially surrenders herself and Peeta, And to me, I just have to wonder why. Is this a physical strength over her? Like she just knows that she would never win in a fight against him? Or is it more sentimental based and in memory of Rue? And that's what I've literally read this book so many times that I've never realized that she says that to him. So it's like, oh, I was taken aback by it.
I think it's how she thinks everybody else is playing the game.
What do you mean?
Like, kill or be killed. Mm-hmm. And that's not how she's playing it. And she really is defenseless in this moment.
Yeah.
So, but he sees it as a debt repaid. He says, just this one time I let you go. For the little girl, you and me were even then, no more owed. You understand? On page 288.
Right.
So I keep going back and forth on whether Rue and Thresh knew each other, or if maybe he kept his distance but was still protective of her, because she didn't go with him to the tall grass on that side of the arena. They didn't have that kind of an alliance where they stuck together. And yet, Katniss helping Rue counts as a debt to Thresh, as though helping Rue was equal to helping him, and worth sparing her life. I wonder if this way of valuing one another's lives is ingrained in District 11 culture, or if it's unique to the relationship Rue and Thresh had. I'm more inclined to think that it's ingrained in District 11 culture because of how willing they are to riot in the second book and how much they have stood with Katniss. And so, in that way, it is understandable that Katniss respecting Rue's life is equal to Thresh sparing Katniss's life. Otherwise, those two seem like an unequal payment for a debt.
So what I was also looking at was when Katniss first wakes up and she asks, how many nights did I miss? And for me, this is 204, but I'm reading it off of my iPad. So the numbering might be different, but when Katniss first wakes up and she's with Rue and she's made this alliance, she asks, how many nights did I miss? And then Rue replies, oh, you missed 2. And I was going to see if she named who was left. And she says, the girls from District 1 and 4 are dead. There's 10 of us left. So she doesn't actually name Thresh out loud. And I was going to see if she did name him to show some kind of familiarity with him. But then, in the next chapter, so that was the end of chapter 15. Chapter 16, about 2 pages later, Katniss asks, who's left again? And she says, the boy from District 1, both tributes from 2, the boy from 3, Thresh and me, and you and Peeta, and the boy from 10. So, she does know who does know who he is, at least to the point of knowing his name. You have to wonder, when they were on the train from District 11 going to the Capitol, maybe she was upset and he comforted her, or maybe they talked over food or whatever. And if they're in the same floor, if they're in the same kind of like apartment suite, the same way Peeta and Katniss were, they must have talked.
Yeah, either that or they didn't talk, but they formed a natural bond without talking, where it's kind of a silent agreement.
Yeah.
We each have to do what we're good at, because Rue is good in the trees and Thresh is good in the grass.
Right.
But be safe, good luck.
Yeah.
And forming that care silently.
It's kind of interesting that Thresh didn't go into the forest too, seeing as he's also from the orchards. Or, I guess if he's from the agricultural district, he might not have worked in the orchards.
Yeah, I got the impression that he doesn't work in the orchards, especially because his name is Thresh, which is something you do to wheat or grain.
Right.
And so I got the impression that maybe he was in the fields doing more of the hard manual labor of, threshing the wheat. Or his family was from that area, whereas she was from maybe the orchards area.
Right. No, that makes sense.
Yeah, because we have a big map of Panem, but it's just occurred to me that each of these districts is divided into several subsections, like how in District 12 you have the seam, which holds most of the coal miners, and you have the merchant class area. In District 11 you probably have a similar divide between what people work on.
You're probably right, but, so maybe it's not really a way of respecting just Rue, but maybe it's also a way of respecting his district. So, saying, you took care of someone from my home, someone who was my people, by not letting her die by herself, giving her a memory that will live on and not discarding her like trash the way Panem has done with District 11, so maybe it's like a debt repaid to my home and to my people, and not so much a personal relationship, but more of like, almost like a family life debt or something.
Yeah, because District 11 saw it as enough of a debt to send her bread when it was super expensive that late in the game. So maybe he heard that and said, oh, well, this was a big debt. I need to do more to pay it off.
Right. Because they do talk about the bread a little bit.
And we get more about debt later on. But for now, this is the last we see of Thresh. He takes Cato's backpack, turning himself into Cato's main target. And in this way, he does a lot more for Katniss than just sparing her life. He gives her time. So Katniss makes it back to the cave, and she injects Peeta with the medicine, and she sees, quote, a green and silver moth before passing out. Did you think this was weird?
I thought it was weird. I kind of thought either she was hallucinating again, or, she's just so in and out of consciousness that the moth came and landed on her and was like, oh, okay, she's not here.
Yeah, I thought that maybe my paying attention to that was reading too much into this book yet again. But apparently not, because Suzanne Collins is a sly dog and put this in as a deliberate symbol.
Oh, really?
Yes. So a green and silver moth refers to the Luna moth, which, let's see, I found a teacher site. In literature, moths tend to represent character transformation and character change,
really?
for obvious reasons. Worm, cocoon, moth.
Moth more so than a butterfly?
Yeah, there's some Shakespeare stuff. I don't know why moths and not butterflies. Maybe butterflies just seem more delicate and moths are more hardy.
There's so many frickin' Miller moths around outside right now that I'm a little jaded towards moths, but I'll let it slide.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we can say that Katniss is turning into a butterfly exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's still a little bit hard to deal with. But according to HungerGamesLessons.com, which is a site for teachers to use when they're reading the Hunger Games in class, quote, when the Luna Moth lands on Katniss's wrist, it marks the point in which she has begun her own transformation. Not only has she changed from a girl in the seam who hunts to feed her family into a girl on fire popular tribute, but she is transforming from a self-serving individual, or selfish for her family and their needs, into a selfless person who cares about others' well-being, putting them first. Katniss here is learning how to do things for others even though she has no relation to them.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons that she did so much for Rue is because she associated Rue so strongly with Prim. But here she is with Peeta, a boy with no relation to her and no real benefit to her that she can see. And she's just risked her life to save his. And that's some intense character development.
Yeah. I guess I never really thought of that moment as being the turning point, but I do see that now.
Yeah,
it's kind of interesting because she kind of regresses a little bit after this point. In Catching Fire, you could argue that her character does take a step backwards. But, you know, that's for another podcast.
Yeah, and this is just the beginning. I mean, I wouldn't have marked this moment if it weren't for the moth.
Right.
But it makes sense. So that's that symbolism.
That's cool. I actually didn't know that about moths either.
I didn't know it either. We all learned something new.
Amazing.
Shall we do chapter 22?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So the summary of chapter 22. Katniss wakes up from her dream about home and finds Peeta alive and well. He bandaged her forehead and tucked her in while she was asleep. And she tells him about the feast and how Thresh saved her life to even out their debt. And Katniss rambles on about how she felt like she owed Peeta because he threw her the bread. But Peeta hasn't thought much of it. He suggests that he helped her then because he loved her. They eat what's left of their food and talk about where Thresh and Cato might be. Thresh went into the tall grass on the other side of the cornucopia at the start of the games, and that grass could contain anything. So Katniss compares Peeta to Gale again. She tries to flirt, but Peeta tells her off for knocking him out to risk her life for him. And Katniss has a realization that if Peeta had died, she really would have been distraught in a way unrelated to the games. Yeah. They kiss and cuddle, and Katniss actually feels good about this. And Peeta tells her about when he knew he first loved her on their first day of school. Katniss takes the initiative to kiss him, and then they receive a whole bunch of food from sponsors.
Yes. So cute. Kiss and food.
Yes. Like a Pavlovian thing, almost.
It's a great way to start a new relationship.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Great way. But you know how we were talking about trust earlier, and how Katniss doesn't trust her mom? Here, she is dreaming about being comforted by her mother. She says she's thinking about how much I miss her even though I still don't trust her. Page 290. So again, Katniss wants to be cared for.
She does.
She wants to be loved. She just won't let herself be.
No.
And later in this chapter, actually, she does. She says on page 299, no one has held me like this in such a long time, when she's cuddling with Peeta. Since my father died and I stopped trusting my mother, no one else's arms have made me feel this safe. So that's a huge step.
That is a huge step.
And she still is a little bit delirious, kind of rambling on and not being able to keep her mouth shut, but she's conscious enough to talk to Peeta and still sick enough to be honest with him. So let's talk about owing and debt and Katniss's idea of debt. They talk about owing and how Thresh spared Katniss's life because he didn't want to owe her for helping and honoring Rue, and she says to Peeta, I don't expect you to understand it. You've always had enough, but if you'd lived in the seam, I wouldn't have to explain, on page 292. So this is kind of what we were talking about in a previous episode with Peeta's privilege and how he doesn't have the same worldview as Katniss because of that privilege. But he's insulted by that. He says, and don't try, obviously I'm too dim to get it.
And here, I think, is a huge moment of his inability to really get it because he thinks it's about being able to explain it or being able to comprehend it, and takes it as a, oh, you don't think I'm smart enough to understand it, when it's in reality, it has nothing to do with his intelligence and her ability to tell him, oh, I owe a debt. It's his having never dealt with it before. So, like, he has literally never been in that situation where he felt he owed somebody a debt for his life. So there's no way for her to explain it to him. There's just not. This reeks of, well, it's hard being a guy too, and that kind of attitude where it's like, yes, of course it is. And yes, of course, Peeta has had struggles, but it doesn't take a genius here to see the level of social inequality here. Peeta threw her wet, burnt bread, and for crying out loud, do you think anyone in his house could fathom eating wet, burnt bread? No, get out of here. I also think it's interesting that she's talking so openly about the seam and talking so openly about this debt when the cameras could be watching. I feel like this is the first moment in the arena where she is openly talking about the inequalities and the things in the arena without really caring about the consequences. It could be a little bit in part due to the fact that she is still sick, but it could also be that she doesn't care anymore. You know, she's just done. Yeah. But it's kind of interesting that she doesn't actually, you know, think to herself, oh, we shouldn't talk about this because the cameras could be rolling. She couldn't give a fuck.
Yeah. It's kind of filter is gone.
Her filter's gone. That was the real meaning of the moth. It just says
Katniss loses her filter.
Removes her filter. It's gone.
Yes.
I also wanted to just kind of talk about social inequality a little bit more. Science Daily has a brief article in regards to social inequality, and it describes social inequality refers to the relational processes in society that have an effect on limiting or harming a group's social status, social class, and social circle. Areas of social inequality include access to voting rights, freedom of speech and assembly, the extent of property rights, and access to education, healthcare, quality housing, traveling, transportation, vacationing, and other social goods and services. Apart from that, it can also be seen in the quality of family and neighborhood life, occupation, job satisfaction, and access to credit. And this is really important to touch on here because at the end of the day, Peeta and Katniss come from such different worlds. They really, really do. Peeta does not understand this life debt thing, and Katniss can't explain it to him. And that's just one of the moments where they just don't see eye to eye, where it's just fundamentally different. You know, we saw a little bit of different social classes at school, depending on who had how much money and, you know, where and everything like that, and what part of the country they came from. You saw it all the time. And with Katniss and Peeta, unless or until they face the same level of social equality or are at the same level or have experienced the same levels of the challenges that the different levels bring, they could not make it work as a couple. You know, eventually I think they do. If you see the rest of the series, you'll see Katniss kind of rise into more of the merchant class, and because she has all of her winnings from the game. And then you'll see Peeta fall because he's in the refugee camp later on in Mockingjay. And, you know, eventually they do start to level out and they can see kind of where the other comes from. But I think if they went home and tried to keep this up as a real relationship right now, it wouldn't happen. It wouldn't work because it's a level of psychological cognitive dissonance that they can't explain to one another. And not saying that one is better than the other or one is holier than thou. It's just literally different circumstances.
Yeah, and I don't think either of them has the vocabulary to express that because their education hasn't focused on class or justice or rights and social inequality. They've been taught to ignore that and just live with that in the background of their lives for their entire lives. And they've just gone on not talking about it. And I think in any mixed class relationship or even a mixed race relationship or practically a mixed anything relationship, talking about this inequality is really hard. Yeah. And they're having to go through it here in the arena. I think they're only doing it here in the arena because Katniss is delirious. But it's something that has been lurking in the background for their entire relationship and that will continue to lurk. Just like microaggressions will lurk in the background of an interracial relationship, class differences lurk in the background of class diverse relationships. And I'm not putting this as well as I could, I know, but this is something that is prevalent for the entire Hunger Games series and that is so vital to Katniss's character that having someone understand her class is part of the reason I think that she prefers Gale at this point in time. Because he understands what it's like to struggle for real.
Yeah.
And even if she explained it to Peeta without experiencing it, he wouldn't get it. And like you said, it's not an insult to his intelligence, it's just one of those things that you have to experience. So Katniss here is the most honest she's been with Peeta, no doubt.
Yeah.
But she finally has a moment of being a kid. She says, I don't want Cato to kill Thresh at all. I don't want anyone else to die, but this is absolutely not the kind of thing that victors go around saying in the arena. Despite my best efforts, I can feel tears starting to pool in my eyes. She is so tired. She's tired of fighting. She's tired of trying to survive and being the person that the Capitol expect her to be. And she's tired of performing. And she says, I want to go home, Peeta. I say plaintively, like a small child. And in this moment, I remembered, oh wait, she is a child.
Yeah.
And
wait a minute, hang on. She's 16.
16! I'm a grandmother.
Seriously.
But she, in this moment, she finally needs to be cared for like a child. She has hit the maximum stress.
Yeah.
And she needs a damn break.
Yeah.
And yet she's not going to get one. She's been acting like an adult in so many ways for so long. And as independent as she wants us and the Capitol to think that she is, she needs someone else sometimes.
She does.
And this is where I'll give my one piece of valuable adult advice that I tell anyone who will listen, is that independence doesn't mean being able to do everything yourself all the time.
Right.
Independence is knowing when to do something yourself and when to ask for help.
Amazing. Yeah.
So Katniss has tried to be that first definition of independent. But she needs help here, and in a way, Peeta provides it.
Exactly. And I think that's how you can kind of compare Peeta to Gale, because I don't see Gale ever really giving her that care that she needs. Not because he's not capable of it or because he doesn't think that she deserves it, but it's just not part of their relationship. You know, this whole time they've built up on she can take care of herself and he can take care of herself and they're okay together. But I don't know if I could see Gale filling this role the way Peeta does.
Yeah, I think a long time ago maybe he used to, when he called her catnip and when he showed her how to hunt and stuff and how to make traps when she was like 12 or something. But now he's 18, she's 16, he's an adult. They've both grown, and yet she's still a child. And he hasn't really recognized that because they've both been through so much.
Right, exactly. In this moment, too, we kind of realize how Katniss feels. She starts to realize that she does feel compassion towards him.
Yeah, she realizes that she would really be upset, genuinely, if Peeta died. I mean, she started by playing into the romance plot and saying that she risked her life for him because the romance, and she would be distraught and a distraught lover. But then she realizes that maybe that's more true than she thought it was. She says, it's not about the sponsors, and it's not about what will happen back home, and it's not just that I don't want to be alone, it's him. I do not want to lose the boy with the bread. Page 297. Ugh, so close, and yet she still calls him the boy with the bread. It's still about the debt.
Is it about the debt, though? Because, I don't know, to me it almost seems like a fondness, almost like a pet name, you know? Like, maybe she's reminiscing about their first interaction, like, oh, the boy with the bread. Like, oh, it's cute. It's almost poetic in a way. It's like, I don't want to lose the boy with the bread. And it almost feels like it's evoking a little bit more than just a life debt, especially since she's thinking about how devastated she would be if Peeta did die. I think this goes beyond the debt that she feels that she owes him. I think this is a fondness.
It could be, but I still think that it's... I still retain that it's a fondness based on the debt, and it's not until the second book that she grows a fondness that is not based on debt.
Okay.
Like how we talked about the moment when he dies in the arena.
Right, right.
So, yeah, I don't think this is it. You can think this is it, but I don't think this is it.
No, I'm not saying this is it. I think it goes deeper than just the debt. This isn't it by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a little bit of the starting point of it.
Yeah, it's starting to go deeper than the debt.
Yeah.
And part of that, I think, is that she won't admit that outside the debt there is anything. But she's admitting that there is something.
There's something.
Something there that wasn't there before?
Something there that wasn't there before. What is it?
I just remember the old VHS commercials for Beauty and the Beast 1996 that was like, "What's there, Mama?"
What's there, Mama? I think there's something there that wasn't there before. What?
I love Chip.
Debt. I know.
Anyway, Peeta tells the story of his long crush on Katniss, and how on the first day of school, his dad did the most awkward thing that a dad could do, which is point out Katniss and be like,
"See that girl?
See that little girl? I wanted to marry her mom, but she went with a coal miner.
Can I pet that dog? Can I pet that dog?
Can I pet that dog?" Was that what you were doing?
Yeah.
See that girl?
You see that girl? I almost married her mom.
Here's a weird fun fact. In the Panem Companion, V. Arrow suggests that maybe the baker is Prim's real dad. Because she's blonde and has fair skin.
Oh, and shit.
That's like a rare and recessive trait.
Yeah.
So Katniss hears this story and thinks, she finally gets it through her thick skull that, maybe Peeta's part of the love act is actually real and he's not faking it. She says, so if those details are true, could it all be true?
Oh, damn.
Her mind is blown, but we've known the whole time. And so she initiates a kiss, and for initiating a kiss, they immediately get food from sponsors.
Hooray! Ding!
And we end with Haymitch's voice telling her, yeah, that's what I was looking for. Which is kind of weird, slightly creepy, but that's what we end the chapter on.
Senior year of high school, I was taking AP Psych, and we did the Pavlov dogs test on ourselves. So every time my teacher would ring a bell, she had a little like diddling bell, we would take a bit of lemonade powder and put it on our tongues. And then eventually at the sound of the bell, we would all start like, yep.
For those listening at home, Nina just stuck out her tongue.
We're almost there.
That's interesting.
Dude, this is crazy.
That's the show, but we're about 3/4 of the way through this book. We're almost done with it. So by the time the next episode comes out, we will have started reading the prequel, and we will definitely be tweeting about that. So thanks for listening. Go ahead and follow us on Twitter at Let's Unpack Pod, because we will be tweeting more often. And if you like, subscribe and rate and review us on your favorite podcast hosting site.
Wherever you are.
Yeah, wherever you are. We are on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and soon to be Spotify, although they haven't emailed me yet to say that we're on there. We have an email now. It's doitforthevamps@gmail.com. So feel free to send us your feedback, what you thought. Do you think that Katniss is really falling in love with Peeta, and how do you interpret?
And who are you? Are you Team Peeta or are you Team Gale? Let us know.
I want to know from the audience. Who were you in middle school, or when you first read this, whenever that was? Were you Team Peeta or Team Gale? And who are you now? I think that would be interesting.
Katniss is a strong, independent woman who don't need no fucking man.
Yes. I'm Team Katniss needs friends before she needs a boyfriend.
She needs to learn about herself.
Yes, and she needs to practice forming relationships before she gets into one that ends in marriage. Anyway, we will see you in 2 weeks. Until then, stay safe. Thanks for listening.
Let's get this bread.
I made bread.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take fermented bread in liquid form. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.